Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're going to be looking at some early revelations of Joseph Smith.
Oh, this is fascinating stuff.
I know, right? We're talking like 1831, right at the beginning of the Latter-day Saint movement.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting about these particular revelations is that
What's that?
they're not like your typical commandments. You know,
Yeah.
It's not like the 10 Commandments or something like that all laid out.
Right.
And one of the things that really stands out is how they deal with authority.
Okay.
So like Commandment 30 to Oliver Cowdery,
Okay.
one of Joseph Smith's closest associates.
Right.
Cowdery is told he can teach and speak when moved by the Comforter,
Mm-hmm.
but he's specifically told not to issue commandments in writing.
Wow. So that's a big distinction, right? Like, were they trying to control the flow of revelation?
That's a really good point, you know?
Because if anyone could just write down a commandment,
Right.
things could get...
Chaotic.
Yeah.
And remember, the Comforter here is most likely referring to the Holy Spirit.
Okay.
So Cowdery can preach under divine inspiration,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't carry the same weight as a written commandment from Joseph Smith.
So there's already a hierarchy.
Absolutely, a hierarchy of authority forming right before our eyes.
Okay, well, this makes me want to know more about these people receiving the revelations.
Yeah.
What were they like? What were they called to do?
Well, a lot of these revelations have a recurring theme.
Oh, yeah?
Missions to the Lamanites.
The Lamanites. Okay, now this is where I get really interested.
Yeah.
Because, the Book of Mormon tells the story of those ancient inhabitants of the Americas.
Exactly. And the early Latter-day Saints believed that Native Americans were descendants of the Lamanites.
Oh, wow.
A chosen people in need of redemption.
Oh, okay.
And so this belief played a huge role in shaping their missionary efforts.
So they really believed they were going to, build a city amongst the Lamanites.
They did. A gathering place for this lost branch of Israel.
That's a powerful vision.
It is.
And it makes these missions so much more than just spreading a message.
Right.
But it also raises questions,
Of course.
about how they viewed race and lineage.
Absolutely.
Were there different opinions about the Lamanites' role within the movement? Okay, so we've got Oliver Cowdery with his, restricted teaching authority
Mm-hmm.
and this broader mission to the Lamanites.
Right.
Who else receives a revelation?
Well, Commandment 31, addressed to David Whitmer.
Okay.
And I remember how we talked about the careful tone with Cowdery?
Yeah.
With Whitmer, it's very different.
Really?
He's directly rebuked,
Wow.
accused of fearing man more than God.
That's intense.
Yeah.
What do you think was going on with Whitmer?
It's hard to say for certain,
Yeah.
but it definitely suggests some tension.
Mhm.
And it's a good reminder that,
Yeah.
these weren't just names on a page.
Right.
These were real people navigating a really new and uncertain religious landscape.
Absolutely. And speaking of uncertain, Commandment 32 to Peter Whitmer Jr.
Yeah.
adds another layer to this Lamanite mission.
Right.
He's told to accompany Cowdery,
Mm-hmm.
and the text explicitly states that no one is placed above Cowdery except Joseph Smith himself.
So again, reinforcing that hierarchy of authority.
Yeah.
Joseph Smith at the top, revelations flow through him,
Right.
and then instructions delegated down the line.
It's almost like a military operation, right?
Yes.
With each individual having a specific assignment
Mm-hmm.
to a larger strategic goal.
And that goal, at least in part, is the conversion of the Lamanites.
Okay, so we've got this fascinating focus on the Lamanites,
Right?
a clear authority structure,
Yeah.
and this sense of urgency around spreading the message.
Yes.
Where do we go from here?
Well, there are other figures who receive specific instructions too.
Okay.
Like John Whitmer is called to preach in a certain region,
Okay.
and Thomas B. Marsh receives counsel on family matters and healing the sick.
So each of these is a window into their worldview.
Exactly. Their worldview and the challenges they faced.
It's like piecing together a mosaic
Yeah.
with all these individual tiles contributing to a larger picture.
It is.
I feel like I'm starting to understand the early days of this movement in a whole new way.
That's the power of these documents.
Yeah.
They allow us to get closer to the lived experiences of these individuals, their hopes, their struggles, and the evolution of their beliefs.
Absolutely. It's amazing how these revelations, for all the talk about divine mandates and ancient prophecies, they also show this very human side
Absolutely.
of this movement.
They weren't just pronouncements from on high.
Right.
These were instructions tailored to specific people
Yeah.
who are grappling with real life challenges.
Exactly. Like David Whitmer being called out for fearing man more than God.
Right.
I mean, what pressures was he facing? Was there resistance from his community?
Hard to say for certain,
Yeah.
but it definitely shows that tension.
Yeah.
This idea that building a new religious movement
Yeah.
wasn't just about theology. It was about navigating relationships,
Right.
managing expectations and anxieties.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's get back to those missions to the Lamanites.
Okay.
Because I'm still trying to understand how this idea actually played out.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Book of Mormon was central to their understanding. But were there any specific instructions on how to approach these missions?
Well, in Commandment 32, where Peter Whitmer Jr. is called to join Oliver Cowdery,
Right.
the instruction is actually pretty open-ended.
Oh, really?
He's basically just told to open his mouth and declare the gospel.
Huh. That's interesting. So they had a lot of trust in the missionaries' judgment.
I think so. And it also shows how the early Latter-day Saint movement was still evolving. Remember, they were still defining their doctrines and practices.
So it was about learning and discovery as much as converting others.
I would say so.
Okay, so what exactly were those core beliefs they were sharing?
Well, they really emphasized the restoration of the true gospel.
Okay.
Claiming that the original Christian church had strayed from its roots. They believed in modern prophets' continuing revelation,
Okay.
the importance of baptism by immersion,
Right.
and the gathering of God's people in anticipation of the second coming of Christ.
So this blend of traditional Christianity
Yes.
with radical new claims and prophecies.
Exactly.
And it seems like converting the Lamanites was key to that prophetic narrative.
It was.
Like a sign of the approaching latter days.
Absolutely. The Lamanites were more than just converts, you see.
Yeah.
They were symbols of this grand historical drama.
Wow.
This belief that, imbued their mission with a real sense of urgency.
It's hard to imagine what it must have been like
Yeah.
to truly believe that you were living in those end times.
It is a powerful concept.
Yeah.
And it clearly had a profound impact on their choices.
Okay, so we've got these missionaries heading on to the Lamanites
Mm-hmm.
with this message of restoration and prophecy.
Right.
But as we go through these revelations,
Yeah.
we also see a lot of individual callings and instructions.
We do.
What can we learn from those?
I think they offer a glimpse into the day-to-day challenges and
Right.
concerns of this new movement.
Okay.
So, for example, John Whitmer was called to preach in a very specific region,
Okay.
highlighting the importance of expanding geographically.
Right.
Thomas B. Marsh received instructions on managing family matters and healing the sick.
So it's like a mix of the grand and the mundane.
I think so. And don't forget,
Yeah.
these individuals weren't just receiving top-down directives.
Right.
They were encouraged to seek personal revelation,
Okay.
cultivate their own spiritual connection.
So this emphasis on individual agency and growth
Was key.
was already there from the beginning.
Oh, yeah. These early revelations show us the origins of that belief system.
Yeah.
How personal revelation was interwoven with the development of the movement.
I'm curious, though.
Yeah.
What kind of opposition were they facing?
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, starting a new religious movement back then
Yeah,
couldn't have been easy.
you're right.
Okay, so we've got these individual callings, the focus on the Lamanites and this whole question of authority in those early years.
Right.
But there's something else here, too.
Okay.
It's like this broader context that's shaping these revelations.
I think you're right. We talked about the Second Great Awakening, all
Yeah.
that excitement about the second coming of Christ.
Yeah.
Well, that fervor really comes through in some of these later revelations.
You're talking about Commandments 35 and 36.
Those are the ones.
The ones to Ezra Thayer and Northrop Sweet.
Exactly.
Because, wow, the language is so vivid.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, lift up your voices as with the sound of a trump.
Right.
The field is white already to harvest.
It's like stepping into a biblical epic.
It is. And there's this real sense of urgency.
Definitely, like, time is running out.
Yeah.
And the world's about to change.
And then they talk about the 11th hour
Yeah.
and the last time that I shall call laborers into my vineyard.
It's like a countdown's begun.
Exactly.
And they're trying to prepare everyone for what's coming.
Okay, so how did this message go over in the 19th century?
Well, you can imagine it wasn't always easy.
Yeah.
Proclaiming these kinds of things in a society that was suspicious of new beliefs.
Right. Even during a religious revival.
Absolutely.
I bet they faced some opposition.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Did they ever talk about that?
Some of the revelations do hint at that opposition
Okay.
and persecution. But instead of getting discouraged, it seems to have fueled their conviction.
Right. This sense of being chosen,
Yeah.
facing trials.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this backdrop of apocalyptic expectation,
Mm-hmm.
a sense of urgency, and this growing opposition.
Right.
And then we get to Commandment 37,
Oh, yeah.
to Orson Pratt.
That one is really something.
It is. The dramatic imagery goes to a whole new level.
Yeah. Pratt is told to lift up his voice and preach repentance.
Oh.
And warn everyone about the coming judgment,
Hmm.
when the sun will be darkened and the moon will turn to blood.
Wow, like some right out of the Book of Revelation.
It is.
I wonder if they were trying to tap into, people's understanding of prophecy and apocalyptic imagery.
I think so,
Like they were using a language their audience already knew.
Exactly. They were drawing on a shared vocabulary.
Yeah.
But weaving it into their own theology.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive,
Mm.
I'm left with so many questions.
Oh, yeah, no, me too.
How do these revelations help us understand the movement?
Well, that's the thing about history, isn't it?
Yeah.
We start with documents,
Right.
but we end up with even more questions.
Absolutely, and these revelations are so specific,
Right.
but they really give us a glimpse into a movement.
That was both rooted in its time and remarkably forward-looking.
Yeah, it's like we've gotten this little peek into their minds, their hopes, their anxieties, and their
Yeah.
belief in this divine mission.
And while things didn't unfold exactly as they predicted,
Right.
their legacy continues to shape the religious landscape today.
Yeah, these revelations weren't just about doctrine or rules.
Right.
They were about inspiring action, fostering community.
And ultimately shaping a movement that changed history.
Well said. Well, that's all the time we have for today.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
But we hope you'll continue exploring these fascinating documents.
And the movement they helped to create.
Until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions going.